Lastly, your hardscape, we're going to use the Mr. Aqua soil. I'm going to use the light sand, the driftwood, and I'm also going to use rocks. For this particular scape, I'm going to end up using smooth river rocks. I have all sorts of different rocks often sold in packages, but I'm going to use the darker rocks with the light background. I think that's going to give a little bit of contrast. And we're going to use these to anchor some of the anubias down and to make like a mound of stuff that naturally went and fell. When you're working on an aquascape, it's a lot easier working dry. You never really want an aquascape when your tank is full of water. So if you want to redo your tank, it's easier putting all the fish in multiple buckets. If you have a hang-on filter, stick it in the bucket that the fish are. Maybe grab a couple air stones, save as much, half of your tank water, and then go to town working on your plants. Now the plants will dry out very quickly, which means some saran wrap or plastic is important to keep these guys moist. The other thing that is very important is a spray bottle. 99 cents, Home Depot. And fill it always with dechlorinated water, because you don't want to kill any good bacteria that you have already growing in your tank. We're going to start by building a mound of the Mr. Aqua soil around and on top of these plants, so we can plant some of these plants here. As I'm doing this, feel free to ask away.
I've got a question.
Sure.
I live on the canal and Valsenaria floats by, Anacris floats by, Micropillion floats by. Can I take any of that out and do something to it to put it in my plant?
As far as treating it for,
Whatever might be on it.
there are a couple of dips that you can do. Some people have done a very minor 10% Clorox bleach dip with the plants for 10 minutes and pull them out quickly and then rinse them. So the only thing is your mileage is going to vary. Some plants are hardier than others. So there's my disclosure. If the plant dies, go grab yourself more plants. Or try it on one and see what happens. Now, any tank, whenever you're going to plant the plants, they need a minimum of 4 inches of substrate. So if you have only about an inch or an inch and a half of substrate, the plants, unless they're very shallow plants or you're doing a ground cover, you're not going to do as well. Most of all these plants, they want to have more ground. For this, we use a couple of tools. This funny thing is actually a sand flattener, and it's a great tool for actually getting the soil where you want it to without getting it on your fingers. Another very important and easy thing to use are these tweezers. Somebody calls them tongs. We had somebody else call them earlier. But I like calling them tweezers. They make them curved and straight. For me, I'm used to working with the straight ones. But what you do is they have a grippy end on the inside. You align your plant so it fits most of it inside between the tweezers, and then you can go straight in to where you want to plant it. In this case, I need to get more soil towards the front. Everybody see okay? All right. So what we're going to end up doing is taking a couple of these valves, not valves, I'm sorry, crypts. We're going to use them towards the back because these guys will eventually grow and get to very close to the water's edge. And this is to give it some depth to the tank.
Is your driftwood weighted?
Nope.
It's not gonna float?
Well, it's been sitting in water and it's already quite heavy because when I first put it in water, it did not even bother floating up. This is manzanita, and manzanita is from California. The wood tends to absorb a lot more moisture much quicker. It wicks water versus trying to resist it like the mohani wood or some of the most common driftwood. So we use this a lot in cases that you're trying to grow mosses above water. It wicks enough moisture to keep the mosses alive. Some of you who were at our old store will remember that, yep, the big trunk that we had, it was a tree. About an inch apart.
That would change the color of the water.
I'm sorry?
Will the wood change the color of the water?
It'll add a little bit of tannins, which is good. Most fish do much better with tannin water. It doesn't stain it that deep like the mohani wood does. So yes, this, after a week of this large piece, this was a root, so it was very, very hard and dense. It did stain the water, you know, a tea color. But after this, there will be very little staining of the water.
Would you like leave it in water so it would drain out?
No, I just grabbed a big Rubbermaid. One of these. Now the smaller pieces, you know, they'll leach a lot less, but you have to weigh them down with a piece of wood, of stone, if you don't have them pre-soaked or pre-boiled. Now, another way, if you have a smaller piece and you're using it in your tank, boil it. And within, you know, half an hour, boom, it's ready to go into your tank. Next, what I'm doing is I'm adding the different types of crypts around. And these are going to give it color. These are all going to be different shades of red and bronze. Also, whenever setting up a tank, you need to add as close to the maximum number of plants that you'll eventually have in the beginning. This way, you're gonna, as the tank matures, you're not gonna have an algae bloom because the soil, it's nutrient rich, it's going to be releasing nutrients. If you have the right amount of plants in there to absorb the nutrients, they'll outcompete the algae. My Despicable Me ringtone.
When you first put the soil in, substrate, you have to increase your water
No different than to establish the tank. You still don't want to wash that. What you're doing, the water changes, is to equalize the system until the plants right now are going to go into shock. They're going to say, what just happened to me? Different water parameters. I just got torn apart. I was happily together and somebody just came in here and uprooted me and they're not happy. And so they're not going to do any sort of growth immediately. They're not going to start doing any growth until probably a week to 10 days. So in that period, yes, you're going to have nuisance algae which will have come into your tank. And you're going to want to limit the amount of free-floating algae spores, because algae is actually transmitted via spores to the water. And that's the purpose of the multiple water changes. Also along with the cycling of the tank.
So this is going to be a slow growing tank also, right? Slow line.
Yes.
So by putting enough plants in there, you can avoid an algae bloom?
Yes. You're still gonna, you may have cloudiness, you may still have a bacterial bloom, but by putting in the right number of plants, having a mix of plants in there, yes, you are gonna avoid an algae bloom, but you're also gonna have to start fertilizing the tank starting pretty soon. Usually like after a week or so, you're gonna have to start doing the fertilization.
Are you gonna stock the tank of fish right after this?
No, I'm gonna have to get a filter going for it, but we are gonna fill it to show you some tricks on how to fill the tank without having a mess. But there is we're gonna have to do other work to it, you know. Time will not allow. Now, the clover, this is a plant that is strictly grown out of water. And all these leaves, especially the big ones, these I've already started, are going to turn brown right away. That is normal. And unfortunately, it's going to look great for the next 2 to 3 days. In about 4 or 5 days, these plants are going to really look ugly. But then it takes a while for the new growth to come in. Now, in my experience, they look like clover right now. They'll actually end up looking like round leaves because the underwater leaves don't have the 4-leaf clover shape to them. But nonetheless, it is still a fun plant to put in there, and I really like the wild look to it because it'll start growing different shoots all over. And that's the whole thing of this tank, is not to have a an organized garden, as more to a wild, more like the Takashi Amano style of a planted tank.
Is the idea of having an under gravel filter.
Who's asking? Oh, there you go.
Is that history now?
Yes, it is history. It went by the way of the Edsel. See? The two people here heard of the Edsel.
Pretty bad.
It went by the way of the VHS and beta tapes.
In your opinion, I think it's better hang on the back filter or canister filter or planting.
If you're gonna do a hang-on, might as well get two hang-ons that can turn over that tank multiple times. I personally like a canister that you can direct. In this case, I'm gonna be setting the outflow pipe facing this way. Because I want that water to go across, hit the front of the tank,